Hello, and welcome to another episode of Our Own Devices. This is most probably our last episode of this season, and we'll take a short break and be back again with more guests and more insight. But we're going to do this episode as a special episode because it's going to be a wrap. It's going to be a wrap telling us what's happening with one of the most popular, or I can maybe say the most popular platform in the country right now. And to talk about Instagram and what's happening on Instagram with Gen Z and all the other users, we have Paras Sharma, who is the Director of Content and Community Partnerships at Meta. Paras, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nandu. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, so Paras, can I start by just giving people a little bit more context on maybe how Instagram has sort of changed over the years, right? I remember being at the Instagram headquarters in 2015. And it wasn't at that point, it was still not considered a place where only or primarily the younger audiences are seen. It was still a place where a lot of people put their photographs and you had even older users like me, being very active there. But it's also now become the hub for the younger people. And in a country like India, which is essentially very young, that's a sweet spot, right? So how do you look at that?
Yeah, I think, Nandu, the evolution of Instagram is also a reflection of how we see the society around us changing, how we see people expressing around us evolving over a period of time. And they're no distinct end of one phase and the beginning of second phase. But if I were to put it in a way, and if you look back, the first phase of content, if I could say that, was about, one would say, what I saw today. And therefore, what came as an expression of people sharing images of the things that they saw or they had aspired to. The second phase, and again, there's no one phase stop and the second phase beginning, but the gradual second phase of what I did today. Therefore, people started showing their activities. They started showing where they're going, they're playing, and the other activities came into being. So as you see, also there's a transition in the media format. And the third phase, which primarily I would say accelerated during the COVID phase, is like what I feel today. And people started to open up and started to share more things. So from what I aspired to be doing or seeing, it's the real self and more authentic self coming in that people started to open up. And I think that was a huge trigger globally and also for us over here, as we saw that in the Reels, which has been the rocket ship of the short form video growth, that led, I would say, a large number of people coming in from all walks of life. No longer the creativity was a domain of fewer people living in the bigger cities and producing high quality polished content. It moved to tier 2, tier 3 towns. People took pride in the culture, in their local context, and started coming and sharing with whatever they're doing in their daily lives with utmost ease and comfort. And that you see expressing itself in the nature of people, in the nature of content. Not to say that any of the other earlier phases are completely gone. But what I'm trying to say is that that's how you can articulate and imagine it going in. And now what we have started to see the early trends of people almost thinking about what I want to experience tomorrow. It's something which goes beyond the realms of my current possibilities, going in the areas of my imagination. And that's where the new technology and everything comes to fore and helps them to enable to create that world for them or to express themselves or what they would want to experience.
It actually had me thinking the way you put it, and you are maybe alluding to the metaverse. But in between, is there a phase now, when you're looking at your, the glasses and all of that, where you're asking, the users are asking people to be with them, to experience with them what they are seeing in real time?
I would say that the presence or the entire focus around that, how can we create a presence where people feel connected to each other? And there are different ways. There's a people can feel connected to each other in a two-dimensional world. We started with WhatsApp, Facebook, and with Instagram, and that the same connection or presence can take form of in a virtual reality, in a metaverse in times to come as well. What is core is presence. The people still feel connected through an Instagram, following that they have through Instagram broadcast channel, where the super fans connect with their idols whom they connect with, or through a WhatsApp group. So there are different products, and that feeling of presence continues to be there. It's just that the form, whether you could feel yourself to be there through a virtual reality or in a different environment and metaverse, that may take a different shape. But our aim to bring people together so that they can form communities, that continues across different formats of platforms and the media format or the language that it takes.
You mentioned how during COVID there was a transition, especially in India, where like you also became, it was more inclusive as far as audiences go. But are you also seeing trends within India that are very specific to this geography?
Oh, yes, indeed. So if you were to look at, so that there are a couple of kind of trends. One is, of course, the Gen Z trend report that we have recently launched. When I say recently, as in as recent as yesterday. But let me tell you about the India trend, if you're focusing and if you're talking alluding to that part. See, if you look at it, there are a few factors at play. There was a factor of what is happening in the environment, in the context, what's happening in the world of technology and product, and what was happening culturally, and all the three forces basically gave the tailwind. So let's look at first on the product and technology. With a platform of Instagram and a product like Reels, what became very easy was creation and also exposure. As I said, that the tools on the app made creation very easy, which means that you do not need to be a trained, I would say, a creator or a producer of content, and you could still produce a pretty engaging content. Culturally, what was happening was there was an increased amount of pride in the local context or community that I come from. There wasn't any feeling of that if I do not come from a metro or a tier one, or if I could not speak an English language or a Polish language, if I can't create the most, if I would use the word classy in that sense of a word, that I cannot. People were comfortable and they started creating it. And then the context which we were happening around it, that there were people who had a lot of time together with them, and they could therefore use that time to unleash the creativity which was always there, and they could experiment and do things. All of those things came to fore to create, I would say, the explosion of content creation. And now to get about it, where it's coming from. If you were to look at it from a supply point of view, more than 70% come from tier 2, tier 3 towns. And when I say supply, from a creator point of view, right? And that's amazing. And that's something that, Nandu, we saw, in fact, pre-COVID around that time, where we saw that there's an ecosystem can grow as long as the base is strong, and we are investing in building in that base to grow. And that was one of the primary reasons that around 3 years back, we expanded our Born on Instagram program to make it accessible for anybody, irrespective of the language. We launched it in 6 languages if they want to be a creator. It's a self-help tool. It's arguably the world's largest creator education program, close to 750,000 people engaged on that. Again, 70% coming from tier 2, tier 3 towns. Now, the creation became easier, and that's where the content is coming from. If we now look at it, it's not only from a quantum of supply and the creators coming in, but even when we look at from the following point of view. So one of the big myths is that the big creators come from bigger cities. So let me break that, right? There's a creator called Rohit Jinkure, who's probably got, no, he's not probably, he's definitely got more following than one of the leading celebrity Bollywood star. He's a lifestyle creator. There's an actor creator from Surat. He's got more followers than recently released Bollywood films star. There's a creator called Social Umama. She's a chef. She's got more following than the #1 chef in India who's been on the various TV shows. So it was no longer, I would say, a domain of pure people coming from bigger cities. So that's #1 myth. #2 is that most of the creators or the larger creators or the impactful creators, they will come from, I would say, north and west because they have a larger footprint. If you look at creators coming from various southern states, and I'm using southern as a cluster, each one has their own domain and a very strong franchise. The effectiveness of the content per unit of content is one of the highest there. It means that they have extremely strong and engaged audience there. If you look at the third myth, which is around, again, on the trends on this side, that we say that you need bigger creators to amplify big cultural movements. Uh, but if you take two examples, one of IPL, cricket is one of the biggest things. If you look at IPL and the recently concluded Cricket World Cup, the largest amount of content creation came from tier three, tier four towns. One of the most watched reels with hundreds of millions of views came not from a tier one city or not from a metro city creator. So these are the things which we see the trend from, what say, the creators from Bharat. So
Mhm.
both India and Bharat started to play on Instagram through reels.
Yeah. So it's also an interesting story of relatability, right? Like, if people are relating more to a person, it doesn't have to be a pan-India celebrity. It's like, that itself is attraction that you're looking at, right?
Which, in fact, Tanu, to your point, is the crux of why creators, right? Why,
Yeah.
and we believe that a significant part of the future media value that will be generated will be attributed to an individual, and that individual
Mhm.
is creator. And why do I say that? If
Yeah.
you look at some of the industry reports, uh, and the users say, or with the user or an audience or fan, depending on how you classify them, they say that close to 60% or more say that they trust the voice of a creator more than a voice of a brand. One of the
Mhm.
ASCII studies says that over 90% of people have said that they bought something after watching the content coming from a creator. And we have seen also on our platform the nature of engagement that a creator led content is driving right now. And, and, and to the point which you mentioned, behind all of that is the trust and authenticity, and it's the
Yeah.
relatability which can come as a outcome of that.
The other thing that I've noticed works very well with Instagram and the other meta platforms is sort of the interoperability. I don't know if that's the right word, but the fact that the content flows so smoothly from one of your platforms to the other, and this is something that you've been doing, I think, in the past 2 3 years. But is that really helping in that sense?
So the way that we look at it is that different people consume different kind of content through different points of time, right? And I'll give you an example to just illustrate this point. And we're talking about a way family of apps, right? Uh,
Mhm.
Depending on a user, there is a I wake up in the morning and just want to check what's the latest message and updates, and someone could find that on a WhatsApp update. So news that they're in the
Mhm.
part of the group it's coming in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Someone wants to see what's whose birthday and families and everything which is happening. It could be on a Facebook. If you want to just see what's the latest your friends have posted, you go on Instagram and you see stories. When you have a little bit time, that you start engaging with reels. A little bit more time, you go to Facebook and start consuming the video content which has been posted over there.
Mhm.
And your business conversations continue to happen on WhatsApp through the day. So
Yeah.
therefore, it's all based on how people spend time and how they engage with their friends. And our family of apps have a role to play through their different surfaces at different points of time.
Are you seeing, you know, in this that all these platforms are also maybe have started catering to slightly different age groups? At least people say very casually that Facebook is not where the younger people are now. Like, if your parents are there, you don't want to be there. Is that true, or is it just a myth?
So I'll answer that, but let me bring this very interesting point since you mentioned this point where your parents are there, you don't want to be there. Uh, and I'll come back to answer this question, but let me bring in one of the very interesting findings from the IG trend report that we just launched yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And I'll put a flag to this question, but I just want to
Mhm.
bring it in because
Yes.
it will make highly contextual sense to your question. And one of the things that we saw, and this is basically what we did was we looked at what are some of the emerging themes that we see would form the trend base for 2024 among the Gen Z, right? Globally, and then obviously putting double clicking on some of the countries, including India. And one of the things that we saw that there is that entire thing that 2024 as they see is the era of personal growth. Now this era of personal growth is coming from that they want to invest time in their self improvement. They want to invest time in, as I say, strengthening their relationships. They want to invest time in healing. Now, when it comes to relationship, and when it comes to there is and where Indian Gen Zs are, they are among, I would say, the strongest across other multiple countries in terms of both trends adoption and in terms of basically trend setting. So they are, and if you look at the three categories, which is food, we look at fashion, and even when we look at some of the other categories, that's where they are, I would say, punching above their weight. They're open. They're like taking in, and they want to experiment with the new trends. One of the things which came in where Indian Gen Z is extremely different from their counterparts and their peer is, while they are about individualism, but they are still, the parents' opinions matter most to them. They still feel that they're truest themselves when at home. Uh, so there's this part about the cultural aspect of the parents and family as a unit. While
Yeah.
in some of the other markets it could be friends or self, in India it's still family and parents. And I'll come back to the IG Trend Talk,
Yeah.
but just to put the point about the Facebook. So it's not about that they want to be away from there. There are different communities and different spaces to engage with different parts of your community. So there is
Yeah.
a time which is spent, and just to share with you that the growth of the young adults audience in India on Facebook continues to grow year on year by double digit. So
Great.
despite the popular meme,
Yeah.
of course, on Instagram is growing even higher, but it's still
Mhm.
growing at a double digit on Facebook platform.
In a way, you are trying to say that the Gen Z in India is ultimately an Indian Gen Z. It has, it
100%.
holds its cultural mooring very, very
Yeah.
strongly.
Yeah.
And it's not like, it's not aping the West in that sense.
No, definitely. So as I was mentioning that the health is extremely important for Gen Zs in India.
Mhm. Yeah.
Second thing, which in their order of priorities for 2024, as we see the trend, is career. And
Yeah.
and again, the importance that Indian Gen Z is placing on career, again in terms of relative importance
Mhm.
across various features, is the highest globally.
Yeah.
The third thing there they want to invest is again exploration, travel. It's
Mhm.
again playing a very high compared to some of their peers. And within, when we look about career and when we talk about the sub points of it, which is wealth creation, Indian Gen Zs are among the highest globally, where they say they want to start their own business. Being an entrepreneurial spirit is extremely, extremely high.
Mhm.
And when we look at some of the other categories of trends, which is what we call the fandom,
Yeah.
there is, I think, 9 in 10 Indian Gen Zs as a percentage, they said that they belong to a fandom. And their fandom diversity, if you look at one of the vectors, music, they could follow BTS and they could also follow Arijit Singh. They could follow Swifties and they could also follow Shreya Ghoshal. And when it comes to, even if you look at sports, obviously Indian cricket team and CSK and RCB on one side to Barcelona and Real Madrid on the other side.
Yeah.
Uh, so they're able to, I would say, maintain the cultural roots at the same point
Mhm.
of time looking global. One of the other interesting things which we saw was with regards to fashion and their outlook on fashion. For many of their global peers, fashion was about comfort, but for Indian Gen Z's, fashion is about creativity.
Mhm.
Is how can I show my creativity by what I wear, and therefore it drives what I wear and how I wear, and that has interesting elements to it. Is about DIY and thrifting and sustainability.
Yeah.
At the same point of time, while there's experimentation, one of the key things about fashion is about modest dressing. So
Got it.
it's almost like both play at the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The part about we all say celebrities and Indians like anybody else, we are and the Gen Zs are very much influenced by the celebrities. Yes, celebrities play an extremely important role, but what has changed, Nandu, is this: it's not about that one-sided following. They are now seeking from their celebrities to be more relatable to them.
Mhm.
They are seeking the celebrities to share their truer sense outside the craft that they do, which is behind the scenes,
Mhm.
their real
Yeah.
life. They're asking the expectation from the celebrity is an advice. So it's not
Yeah.
just about I'm following of what you do on a different field. Now I want to
Mhm.
relate and I want to come closer to you.
It's actually very interesting. Like, a couple of takeaways from what you're saying. One, I get the sense that the Indian Gen Z is much more, has a wider horizon, compared to their peers across the world. Because, you know, uh, in the US, you wouldn't see people have such a wide interest range. They're more inward looking, as far as I know. They're more focused on what happens in the United States of America in that sense. Like, you wouldn't have people who are looking at such a wide range. And also the fact that they are in a way a barometer of the country, right? Like, you're talking about maybe, the largest set of people in this country, which is more than 50% as far as we know. And and you really don't get a sense of how they are thinking other than looking at an Instagram or a platform like that, right? And would you agree? Because, I get a sense that this is the window into an audience that we don't study in that sense.
Yeah, so I think that there are a couple of things in it, and as you know that in on Instagram, every feed is like in Facebook,
Yeah.
every feed is personalized. Like
Yeah.
what you see and what I see is based on
Mhm.
on your behavior and your interest and
Yes,
my
yes, yeah,
views
yeah.
of behavior. So it's uh, one has to be very careful that we look at a certain content
Mhm.
to which may be coming from our feed or a couple of other people's feed to make an assumption on that this is the content because
Yeah.
two people could be
Yes.
very close and similar profile but may have a very different content feed based on their interest. But
Yeah, yeah.
I get the larger point and I agree with you is what you engage with and the nature of creators. And that pretty much reflects, Nandu, also in terms of the diversity of the content. What
Yes.
we have seen that with as much of ease and as much of following, which is there for what we will call the mainstream entertainment content, is to content which is about DIY, which is about thrifting, which is about self
Mhm.
help, which is about auto, which is about tech, as much as about dance,
Yeah.
movies, and music and sports. There's as much interest in groups, which could be gardening tips,
Yes.
with
Tell me
as much
about it.
about the food tips, right?
Yeah.
So there is a very and that in fact has also given an opportunity, and we have been cognizant, and that's how the platform also is built, that give people more exposure to something and someone which are unconnected audience as we call it. And even with our AI investments, uh, we have exposed or we have given people increasingly what we feel that they would like from the unconnected audience or the unconnected followers that they have. Uh, and we've seen the increase in the time spent because people do want to consume different kind of contents and they do not want to be only consuming who they follow because they want to discover more. And
Yeah.
that is also leading to a very rich and diverse set of creators who are very good in what we would otherwise call niche, and I call it micro communities, because there's a very strong following in each of those communities. Gone are the days when we were only focused around few macro culture movements,
Yeah.
which are still there, but there are many micro cultural movements where people are very happy to engage with each one of them and spend time with that.
And interestingly, somebody like me has I have learned so much about gardening just from Instagram
Yeah.
in the past few months. And like, every time I go on Instagram, I end up with two flower pots being delivered to my home the next day, right? And also even discovering new trends in music, new trends in art. Like, it is also a great way
Yeah.
to see how the world is changing, and you don't have to go and search for it. It sort of comes to you. Yeah. Before we wind up, just one last question. How do you look at 2024? What is most exciting for you looking ahead?
So I think on multiple dimensions, if I could say that, uh, there are few continuing themes. One is that from a user point of view or from an audience point of view, I think people are becoming more open to uh, uh, different kinds of content, different kind of things. They
Mhm.
want to spend time and they want to get new experiences. From a creation point of view, uh, even within the larger genres, we see creators now finding smaller nuances in it. So it's
Mhm.
not about music per se, it's about the music recording or the sound effects. It's not about acting per se, but within that. It's not about comedy per se, but what are the subgenres of it. So we see there's a
Yeah.
lot which is coming on the creation side. The third area where we see from what our platforms are doing, and we already launched many of this AI chatbots and avatars, that they will be more personalized engagement tools, which will be there
Mhm.
built around AI. Uh, and I think one of the things that I've already seen from a brand point of view and from a marketer's point of view is the acceptance and recognition which is now built up to some of the myths that I was talking about earlier, that A, that the influencer marketing or creator marketing has a huge impact and a role to play. It's almost like the the brands create products and services and creators create content. Now creators are becoming brands in themselves. And
Yeah.
I see that there's a huge amount already happening in brands recognizing that thing and the importance of the what we call the micro and regional creators coming to the fore. And overall, see, I think one thing which will continue rapidly is what we call Bharat. I don't, I'm
Mhm.
using the word Bharat for
Yeah.
contextualizing it, but
Yes.
tier three,
Yeah.
tier four towns, regional
Mhm.
content, more and more, I would say, interesting content coming from there, and more very solid creators coming from there.
Absolutely fascinating to understand that there is more to a platform that we just have, or to a platform that has all our attention. So Paras, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Nandu.
So you were listening to Paras Sharma of Meta. We'll be back next season now with much more knowledge, insights, and wonderful guests like Paras. Till then, we'll be available everywhere you listen to your podcast.